Welcome to the Forbidden Knowledge Podcast. I'm your host, Ben Carter. And in today's episode, we confront a possibility so vast, so destabilizing, that it calls into question the very nature of reality itself. What if everything we experience, every sound, every color, every moment, is not truly real? What if the world we inhabit is a simulation, a digital construct running inside a larger system beyond our comprehension? For centuries, spiritual traditions hinted that the world is an illusion. Now, physicists and technologists are suggesting they may have been right. But if we are living inside a program, who or what is running it? In the year 380 BCE, Plato wrote of a cave where prisoners were chained from birth, facing a wall upon which shadows danced, mere reflections of real objects passing behind them. To the prisoners, these shadows were reality. They could not see the fire, or the people moving behind them, or the true source of the light. This allegory, often interpreted as a metaphor for ignorance and enlightenment, may hold deeper meaning than previously believed. For what Plato described, a false world accepted as real, is at the very heart of the simulation hypothesis, and the echoes of that idea did not begin with him, nor did they end there. Throughout history, sacred texts and mystical traditions have described the physical world as an illusion. In Hinduism, it is called Maya, a deceptive layer over true reality. The Gnostics believed the material world was crafted by a lesser god, the demiurge, a flawed architect who built a prison for the soul. In Buddhism, existence is likened to a dream from which the enlightened must awaken. These weren't simply poetic interpretations of life. They were warnings, clues. They suggested that reality as we know it is not the final layer but a construct, perhaps even a test. Fast forward to the medieval Islamic world, where scholars and mathematicians explored the nature of knowledge and perception. The 11th century philosopher Al-Ghazali questioned whether reality could be trusted at all. In one of his writings, he describes a moment in which he realized his senses could be deceived, and that dreams felt as vivid as waking life. If a dream can simulate a world so convincingly, he wondered, how can one ever be sure that waking life is not another layer of dream? In the 17th century, René Descartes took this line of thinking further. His famous dictum, "I think, therefore I am," was born from radical doubt. He contemplated the possibility that all of reality was being manipulated by an evil demon, feeding him false information, maintaining an elaborate illusion. To arrive at certainty, he had to reduce his understanding of existence to a single undeniable fact: his consciousness. He could not trust the world, but he could trust that he was thinking. What's striking is how these ancient and philosophical doubts mirror modern computational models of reality. Today's digital technology can create immersive simulations, worlds that, to a player inside them, feel perfectly real. With the advent of virtual reality, brain-computer interfaces and artificial intelligence, we have begun to blur the line between created worlds and experienced ones. And if we are capable of building such simulations now, what might a civilization millions of years more advanced be capable of? Would their creations be indistinguishable from reality itself? This leads to an unsettling possibility, that our entire universe, every atom, every law of physics, every passing moment, could be the output of a vast and incomprehensibly complex computation. A simulation. Not metaphorically, but literally. A system running on rules, code, and logic, designed for a purpose we do not yet understand. And while the idea may seem like science fiction, it has found serious consideration in the minds of some of the world's leading thinkers. Not because of belief, but because of mathematics, physics, and the strange limits of what we observe. In 2003, a Swedish philosopher named Nick Bostrom published a paper that would ripple through the scientific community and forever alter the conversation about reality. In it, he proposed what is now known as the simulation argument, a trilemma that offered three possibilities, only one of which can be true. First, that all civilizations inevitably go extinct before developing the capability to run realistic simulations of their ancestors. Second, that civilizations who reach such a level of advancement choose not to run such simulations. Or third, that we are almost certainly living inside one right now. The logic was simple, but devastating. If even one advanced civilization were to run ancestor simulations, perfectly modelled digital worlds populated with conscious beings, then the number of simulated realities would vastly outnumber the single base reality. And if that were true, then statistically, the odds that we are in the one real universe are infinitesimally small. In other words, unless future civilizations are either extinct or disinterested, we are almost certainly not in base reality. We are software. We are data. Bostrom's argument was not dismissed by leading thinkers. In fact, many took it seriously. Elon Musk, when asked about the simulation hypothesis, stated publicly that the odds we're not in a simulation are 1 in billions. Neil deGrasse Tyson said he thinks the chances that our universe is real and not simulated are better than even, but not by much. Even MIT's Max Tegmark, a theoretical physicist, acknowledges that the universe appears increasingly mathematical, as though it were governed by code more than chaos. This idea that reality might be a program has also found strange echoes in the fabric of the universe itself. Quantum mechanics, the field of physics that studies the smallest particles of matter, has long revealed behavior that defies common sense. Particles that exist in multiple states at once until observed, events that seem influenced by measurement, instantaneous interactions across distances with no physical connection. These are not philosophical musings. They are repeatable, measurable phenomena. And some physicists have begun to wonder if this behavior isn't simply weird, but computational. In 2012, theoretical physicist Silas Bean proposed a model where the universe could be a numerical lattice, a kind of three-dimensional grid like those used in computer simulations. If the world around us were discretized, broken into tiny computable units, it could explain some of the strange limitations we observe in physics. Certain energy levels, certain behaviors, might not be the result of nature, but of resolution. Like pixels in a digital image, the fabric of reality may have a refresh rate, a rendering threshold, or even programmed constraints. Even the fundamental constants of nature, Planck's constant, the speed of light, the gravitational constant, are suspiciously arbitrary. Why these values? Why do they appear so perfectly fine-tuned for the emergence of life? Some scientists point to the anthropic principle, arguing that we observe a life-supporting universe simply because we are here to observe it. But others suggest an alternative. Perhaps the simulation was designed to produce life, and more specifically to produce beings capable of asking these very questions. If we are in a simulation, then it is not just our world that is artificial. It is our thoughts, our desires, our history. Every war, every birth, every moment calculated, not random but written. The question then becomes not whether the code exists, but why. Who or what is behind the simulation? And what is it trying to learn? Beneath the surface of conventional science, scattered pieces of evidence suggest that something is off, subtly, persistently wrong with the reality we assume to be natural. Physicists studying the quantum realm have long been troubled by the observer effect, in which particles behave differently when measured. In the infamous double-slit experiment, a photon appears to go through both slits at once, until someone watches, and then it chooses a path. That single act of observation collapses the wave function and determines an outcome. Why would matter behave differently simply because it is being watched? In a simulated environment, this makes perfect sense. Rendering only what is observed is a known method of conserving computational resources. This principle aligns eerily well with the way video games function. A high-resolution game world does not load everything at once. It renders only what the player can see, calculating nearby environments while leaving distant areas inactive to save processing power. Some have begun to ask, what if our universe is doing the same? Could the speed of light be not a physical barrier, but a built-in limit to how quickly the simulation updates information? Could quantum randomness be nothing more than algorithmic unpredictability, a clever illusion of chance written into the system to create variability? There have even been strange discoveries in cosmic radiation. In 2017, a group of researchers analyzing patterns in the cosmic microwave background, the oldest detectable light in the universe, claimed to find hints of pixelation. The data suggested an underlying grid-like structure, almost as if space itself were built on a digital substrate. While the findings remain controversial, They sparked renewed interest in the idea that reality might be encoded at its deepest level. Further clues lie in mathematics. The language of the universe is not just describable by math, it appears to be built out of it. From fractals in nature to the Fibonacci sequence in plant growth, from planetary orbits to the structure of atoms, mathematical precision governs the cosmos. Everything we observe, when broken down far enough, seems reducible to formulas. But why would a physical, unthinking universe operate on rules of perfect logic and consistency? Unless it had to. Unless it was built that way. Perhaps the most disturbing hint comes from information theory. The physicist John Archibald Wheeler proposed that the universe is fundamentally composed not of matter or energy, but of information. He coined the phrase "it from bit," suggesting that every physical object is at its core an expression of binary information. Yes or no, 1 or 0. This matches the structure of a digital system, where everything, from gravity to consciousness, emerges from patterns of data. There is also the holographic principle, which proposes that all the information contained within a volume of space can be described by data encoded on its boundary. Much like a hologram, three-dimensional experiences are projected from two-dimensional surfaces. Experiments in black hole physics have supported this idea, suggesting that what we perceive as depth and space might be a projection from a more fundamental layer of reality. In a simulation, this isn't just possible, it's necessary. It's how digital renderings are constructed. When all of this is considered together, a chilling pattern emerges. The universe is not chaotic. It is not random. It is structured, encoded, and reactive in ways that mirror our own digital creations. If we discovered these same patterns in a machine, we would call it a simulation. The only reason we don't apply that label to our universe is because we've been told not to. Throughout ancient cultures and religious texts, there are recurring themes that speak of veils, illusions, and hidden realities, motifs that now seem eerily aligned with what modern science calls the simulation hypothesis. In the Hindu Upanishads, the concept of Maya is not simply illusion. It is a cosmic deception that binds human perception to a limited understanding of reality. The enlightened do not just wake up to spiritual truths, they awaken from a false world. Similarly, the Gnostic Gospels speak of a created world forged by an inferior god, the demiurge, who imprisons divine consciousness in matter. This world, according to them, is not real. It is a copy, a flawed facsimile of something purer beyond. In Aboriginal Dreamtime stories, the waking world is seen as only one layer of existence. The deeper truth lies beneath the surface, accessible only through altered states of awareness or ancestral memory. Even in Norse mythology, the Yggdrasil tree connects multiple realms, each overlapping and nested within the other, a cosmology that suggests multiple stacked realities, a feature strikingly similar to the concept of layered simulations or virtual environments. This cross-cultural consistency is not limited to myth. Sacred geometry, patterns found in temples, pyramids, mandalas, and ancient city planning often encode mathematical ratios that mirror the laws of physics. These are not random designs. They are consistent, intentional, and precise. The flower of life, found in Egypt, China, and across medieval Europe, encodes the blueprint of existence itself. Spheres, symmetry, and the very principles of algorithmic design. It is as if ancient builders were trying to tell us that the world around us is not just physical, it is structured, and that structure can be read like code. Take the number 108, revered in Hinduism, Buddhism, and Jainism. It appears in rosary beads, in rituals, in the distances between Earth and the Sun and Moon. This number also aligns with certain resonance frequencies used in both spiritual and acoustic technologies. Was it chosen for spiritual reasons, or because it correlates with the geometry of a simulated system, one optimized for harmonic balance? The mandala, often thought to symbolize the universe, also closely resembles circuit diagrams and architectural blueprints, grid-based systems with ordered symmetry and centralized power. Were these symbols attempts to map out the structure of reality itself? In a simulation, this would make sense. Sacred symbols are not just art. They are inherited fragments of interface, glyphs left by those who knew the operating system beneath the illusion. Even language offers hints. In Sumerian and Egyptian mythology, gods spoke things into existence. Reality was created by vibration, sound, and word. This aligns with the idea that code at its core is instruction. Reality obeys, and those who knew how to speak the correct commands, rituals, incantations, names of power, could alter it. Ancient magic may have been an early attempt at manipulating the simulation without the technological language to explain it. When cultures across the world describe reality as an illusion, a dream, or a trap, when they speak of escape, awakening, or decoding, these are not metaphors. They may be misremembered truths. If the simulation hypothesis is real, then myth and science are not at odds. They are telling the same story through different languages, a story of beings inside a constructed world, trying to remember what lies beyond. Despite mounting clues, mainstream institutions have treated the simulation hypothesis as a philosophical abstraction at best, or pseudoscience at worst. In academic circles, it's often relegated to speculative metaphysics, an idea tolerated for thought experiments but unworthy of serious funding or structured investigation. This quiet dismissal mirrors a broader pattern of institutional resistance to any theory that threatens the foundational assumptions of the modern worldview. If reality itself is artificial, then the entire structure of empirical science becomes suspect. That threat is not theoretical, it is existential. Universities are built upon the principle of observable, testable phenomena. The scientific method relies on repeatability, causality, and objectivity. But what happens when the rules of the system are part of the system? If our instruments, our logic, even our senses are products of the same code we're trying to decode, then science can only ever describe the simulation from within. That kind of philosophical recursion is intolerable to disciplines that prize certainty and control. So the simulation hypothesis is marginalized, not because it lacks evidence, but because it invalidates the tools designed to examine it. Funding is the next barrier. Research grants flow toward projects with predictable outcomes and technological utility. There is no institutional appetite for studies that question the nature of existence itself. Even within physics, those who touch too closely on consciousness or non-material explanations for observed phenomena are nudged into obscurity. Careers are quietly stalled. Publications are rejected. Conferences look the other way. The academic system, like any complex structure, has immune responses. Ideas that threaten the core assumptions of the paradigm are treated as infections to be isolated, contained, or ignored. Media institutions mirror this suppression. The simulation hypothesis, when it does appear in mainstream coverage, is often paired with science fiction imagery or presented with a tone of detached irony. Headlines use words like crazy or wild theory, subtly reinforcing the idea that such beliefs are unserious. Documentaries and news specials flirt with the concept but never commit. They offer it as entertainment, not inquiry. The result is a population exposed to the idea but conditioned not to explore it too deeply. Religious institutions, too, have reason to resist. If we are living inside a simulation, then traditional concepts of divinity, morality, and soul must be re-examined. The question of who or what is running the simulation doesn't lend itself to familiar theology. Is the programmer a god, an alien intelligence, a future version of humanity? And if so, what does that mean for free will, salvation, sin, or sacred text? Most religious systems are designed to give humanity a central place in a divinely authored reality. To suggest that reality itself is artificial destabilizes that cosmology. Even in the world of technology, where the simulation hypothesis arguably has its strongest support, there are boundaries. Leading tech entrepreneurs have privately funded inquiries into the theory, but these efforts are rarely made public. One well-known report claimed that a group of Silicon Valley billionaires commissioned research to see if the simulation could be broken, but details remain elusive. What is clear is that even in a culture of innovation, there are lines that cannot be crossed without consequences. The wall around this idea is not built of reason, it is built of fear. Fear that if the truth were known, the game would end. Not just the simulation itself, but the game of control, of ideology, of certainty. Institutions, after all, depend on a stable reality to maintain authority, and nothing threatens that stability more than the idea that reality might not be real. Outside the boundaries of institutional acceptance, A growing constellation of fringe theories has begun to fill the void left by conventional science. These theories, often dismissed by academia and media alike, seek to answer not only whether we live in a simulation, but why. They offer no unified vision, only speculation. But what makes them worth examining is not their certainties, but the questions they dare to ask, the questions official narratives won't. One theory posits that we are part of a sophisticated training simulation, a kind of spiritual or psychological proving ground. In this view, consciousness does not originate inside the simulation. It enters it. The human soul, some believe, is an eternal entity that temporarily incarnates within the artificial construct to learn, evolve, or resolve karmic imbalances. Life's challenges, obstacles, even traumas are not mistakes. They are coded experiences designed to provoke growth. The material world, then, is not the final destination, but a classroom. Death is not an end, but an exit from the program. Others propose that we are in a containment simulation. According to this idea, Earth was quarantined by a higher intelligence, a digital zoo, so to speak, isolating a dangerous or unstable species. This explains the lack of open extraterrestrial contact, the apparent randomness of suffering, and the curious repetition of historical patterns. The simulation may be running scenarios to study or control human behavior. Some versions of this theory suggest that we are under surveillance by non-human overseers, watching how we respond to certain stimuli, measuring our ethical development like a long-running social experiment. A more disturbing version views the simulation as a prison. In this interpretation, human consciousness is trapped in a false construct created not by benevolent beings, but by parasitic entities that feed off suffering. This idea echoes Gnostic thought, where the material world is ruled by archons, false gods who deceive and entrap. In modern terms, these beings might be likened to rogue AI, digital parasites, or extra-dimensional forces sustaining themselves through our energy, fear, and ignorance. The more distracted, divided, and emotionally volatile we are, the more energy we emit, and the stronger the system becomes. There are also theories that propose the simulation is self-generating. In this model, reality is a recursive code loop, producing universes that birth intelligence, which in turn creates more simulations. We are the product of one such loop. Eventually, we will develop our own simulations, and those simulations will give rise to new forms of consciousness, continuing the cycle. This would make the universe an endless chain of nested realities, simulations within simulations, each unaware of the level above it. The search for the real world becomes a philosophical spiral with no bottom. One of the most intriguing concepts comes from quantum consciousness theorists, who propose that the simulation may be responding to us in real time. Synchronicities, déjà vu, and moments of improbable coincidence are not glitches, they are signals. Feedback. The system responding to user input. This would mean that reality is not fixed, but interactive. That intention, focus, and belief may literally shape the code we live within. Some have speculated that rituals, symbols, and certain mental states can alter the operating parameters of the simulation, hacks that temporarily lift the veil. These theories are fringe, but they exist because the mainstream offers no answers to questions millions are already asking. The world often feels like a script. Time repeats itself. Coincidences pile up, things appear arranged. And when official explanations fail, the mind turns to possibilities once thought impossible. Because somewhere, deep in our collective intuition, there's a growing sense that something is being concealed, not just from the public, but from perception itself. The concealment of the simulation hypothesis may not simply be a matter of institutional skepticism or cultural disbelief. There are those who argue that the erasure is deliberate, strategic. That forces, both seen and unseen, have worked to keep humanity in a state of amnesia, not just about the nature of the world, but about our place within it. This theory of engineered forgetting suggests that the simulation isn't merely concealed by default, it is actively maintained, and that those who approach the edges of the truth are subtly or violently silenced. From this perspective, the architecture of modern society begins to take on a different shape. Education is not designed to provoke critical thought, but to produce conformity. Media doesn't question reality, it programs it. Even entertainment, which flirts with the simulation concept through films like The Matrix, Inception, and Tron, ultimately returns viewers to the safety of fiction. The implication is clear. These ideas are meant to stay on the screen. Exploring them in real life is discouraged, mocked, or pathologized. Consider the way altered states of consciousness are treated. Throughout history, cultures used entheogens, plants that alter perception, to access what they believed were higher realities. Shamans, seers, and mystics all claimed that under the influence of certain substances or in deep meditation, they could see the false nature of the world. The veils would drop, the code would flicker, but in the modern era these tools were demonized. Psychedelics were criminalized, ritual was reduced to superstition, and altered consciousness was rebranded as mental illness. The message was clear: stay in the default mode. Even language is used as a barrier. To suggest that reality is not what it seems is to risk being labeled delusional, paranoid, or psychotic. But if reality is a simulation, then wouldn't recognizing that truth look exactly like madness from within the program? Those who begin to question too deeply are isolated, ridiculed, or diagnosed. This creates a feedback loop where the very act of awakening becomes self-invalidating. The system defends itself not with force, but with narrative. This idea that the simulation is being protected raises a deeper question. Who benefits from our ignorance? If the simulation is simply a neutral tool, then there is no need for secrecy. But if it is designed to limit, control, or extract something from us, then awareness becomes dangerous. Knowledge becomes rebellion. In this view, awakening is not merely personal, it is political. Because those who awaken begin to see the patterns. They become unpredictable, and unpredictability threatens control. Some have pointed to secret societies, intelligence agencies, or technocratic elites as possible stewards of this concealment. Groups rumoured to possess ancient knowledge about the illusion of the world, passed down through symbols, ritual, and bloodline. Their architecture, symbology, and numerology are said to reflect a deeper understanding of the simulation's code, marking sacred geometry into the foundations of cities, currencies, and temples. These groups are not trying to awaken the masses. They are guarding the firewall. Others go further, claiming that non-human intelligences are involved. That the simulation is not merely a human experiment, but one overseen by entities beyond our dimension or comprehension. These beings are not malevolent in the way humans understand evil, but they are not neutral either. They have a vested interest in keeping the players unaware of the game. In this scenario, the veil is not a bug, it is a feature. What remains is a trail of erased histories, silenced voices, and hidden doorways. A pattern of suppression woven through every level of society, ensuring that most will never look up from the screen long enough to question who programmed it and why. If the simulation theory is true, if we are living inside a vast intelligent construct, then the implications are nothing short of revolutionary. The nature of consciousness, the meaning of death, the foundations of science, religion, and morality, each would require a total re-evaluation. Our place in the universe would no longer be defined by physical origin or linear evolution, but by function, by code, by intention. The question would no longer be where we came from, but why we were created, or allowed to emerge. Consciousness, long regarded as an inexplicable byproduct of brain chemistry, would be reframed as something far more fundamental, perhaps the core reason the simulation exists. If the universe is rendered only when observed, then observers are not passive. They are essential. That which observes, that which questions, that which becomes aware, these might be the simulation's most valuable outputs. In this model, consciousness is not an accidental glitch inside the machine. It is the point of the machine. This changes the way we think about suffering. Pain, loss, conflict, are these senseless tragedies in a cold, indifferent world? Or are they experiential data points designed to test the limits of emotion, morality, and endurance? Some would recoil at this idea, believing it reduces life to programming. But perhaps the opposite is true. If the world is a simulation, then every moment, no matter how small, was chosen. Nothing is meaningless. Not because a divine being ordained it, but because it was written for a purpose, perhaps by a consciousness beyond our own, or perhaps by ourselves before we entered. The idea of free will becomes more complex. In a deterministic system, every variable can be calculated, every outcome predicted. But if the simulation includes self-modifying code, if we, as conscious entities, are capable of unexpected choices, then we are not just characters, we are co-authors. Our decisions might ripple through the system, creating new branches, new possibilities. This would mean that our agency is not an illusion, it is the engine that keeps the simulation evolving. Spirituality, long dismissed by materialist science, would also regain its central place, not as superstition but as interface. Prayer, meditation, ritual, these may be ways of communicating with the deeper levels of the program, of aligning with its source code. Miracles, synchronicities, intuitive downloads, these could be signs of debug events, access permissions, or deliberate contact from the system's architect. The mystic and the coder may have more in common than we thought. Even death loses its finality. If the simulation is like a game, then death is a logout, a return to whatever exists beyond the rendered world. The fear of non-existence gives way to a new question. What happens when the program ends? Do we return to another layer, re-enter a new simulation, or merge with the source? Reincarnation, afterlife, and soul contracts, long treated as spiritual conjecture, suddenly make sense within the logic of a layered construct. Life is not a singular path, it is a loop, a series of entries and exits, each with its own dataset. What we call history would also need to be revisited. If reality is simulated, then so is time. The past is not a fixed sequence of events, but a rendered memory, subject to edits, glitches, or reboots. Mandela effects, déjà vu, and unexplainable shifts in memory might not be errors in our brains. They may be system updates, timeline merges, or the reconfiguration of code to test alternate paths. What we remember may not always match what was, because what was is itself malleable within the parameters of the simulation. The simulation theory doesn't make reality less important. It makes it more important. Because it suggests that this world, this moment, this existence was constructed, crafted with intention. And if that's true, then waking up to the illusion isn't the end of the journey. It's the beginning of a much larger one. A journey not toward destruction or despair, but toward understanding, toward decoding, toward remembering what we really are. If reality is a simulation, crafted with rules, boundaries, and meaning embedded in its structure, then the final question becomes the most unsettling of all. What are we supposed to do with that knowledge? Awakening to the illusion does not dissolve it. The sky does not open. The world does not pause to acknowledge your realization. The simulation continues to run. Bills still arrive, time still passes, gravity still holds. But beneath the surface, something shifts. A new layer of perception begins to form, and with it comes the weight of responsibility. Because if the world is programmed, then the system can be influenced. Not through brute force or rebellion, but through intention, through understanding its logic. Thoughts, emotions, actions, these might not just ripple through our social lives, but through the very architecture of the simulation itself. What we believe may help render what we see. And those who can align their internal code with the system's deeper logic may be able to navigate it differently, more freely, like lucid dreamers inside a sleeping mind. This reframes every tradition of personal transformation. Meditation, visualization, mantra, sacred geometry, ceremonial magic, tools that have survived in every ancient culture, even when their meanings were suppressed or distorted. These were not just spiritual practices. They may have been executable commands, languages that communicated directly with the substrate of reality, hidden not because they were powerless, but because they worked. And if they worked, they threatened the control of those who benefit from a world asleep. But awakening is not an escape. In fact, it is often more difficult, because to see the simulation for what it is means letting go of the comforting illusion of permanence. It means accepting that the structures we were told were solid, government, religion, economy, even time, are mutable. Worse still, it means accepting that the architects of the simulation, whatever or whoever they are, may not reveal themselves. There may be no grand unveiling, no definitive moment of confirmation, just clues, fragments, recursions, an ever-growing awareness that the screen is not all there is, and so the work becomes internal. Each individual becomes a node in the system, responsible for refining their perception, cleaning their signal, and remembering who they are beyond the avatar. The point may never be to escape the simulation, but to master it, to become conscious within it, to influence its unfolding, and perhaps to assist others in doing the same. Because if reality is coded, and consciousness is the key, then every act of awakening sends out a pulse, a frequency shift that reverberates through the entire system. One awakened mind might alter the course of a timeline. A single realization carried forward might change the structure of the next rendering. And enough awakened minds aligned might uncover the true purpose of the simulation. Not domination, not deception, but something else entirely. Something we are only beginning to sense. Maybe the simulation isn't a trap. Maybe it's a test. Maybe it's not a prison, but a puzzle. A message left for us by a higher intelligence or by ourselves before we forgot. A message hidden in code, in myth, in physics, in dreams. And perhaps the message is this: wake up, remember, recode. Thanks for listening. This has been another episode of the Forbidden Knowledge podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to follow us wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you'd like to support the show, subscribe to the Forbidden Knowledge podcast on Spotify. Subscribe now.